All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I have a couple minutes after 2 here on our end. My name is Bobby Haggard with TrinSoft, and we're excited to have the BinaryStream. We have Jerry and Peyton with BinaryStream with us today to show us a little bit more about their multi-entity management tool. A few housekeeping notes here on the webinar. We went ahead and muted all of the phones to try and cut down some of the background noise. We do certainly encourage you to ask questions. If you have a question, please use the chat tool of GoToMeeting. We will be monitoring that, and we'll try and answer most of those questions at the end if possible. If there's a need to take that question offline and follow up directly, we will certainly do that. As a part of this, we are recording this presentation, so if there's a need to watch this again, or if you have certain questions, or if you'd like a copy of the presentation or the presentation slides, let us know and we can certainly get these passed over to you as needed. With that, I'd like to introduce Peyton with the Binary team. Peyton is an experienced account manager in the Dynamics GP and Business Central and F&O space. While working in the partner channel, he focuses on delivering solutions to dynamic clients to help enhance their ERP and simplify their business processes. With that, I'll let you take it away, Peyton.
Thanks, Bobby. All right, everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be discussing multiple business entities, improve your Dynamics 365 Business Central environment with multi-entity management. So my name is Peyton Lupo. As Bobby mentioned, I'm an account manager at BinaryStream. I work really closely with the TrinSoft team to deliver our dynamic solutions to their clients. I also have on the line with us Jerry Taylor. Jerry's one of our Business Central solution consultants who's going to be doing the actual demo of multi-entity management for us today. So, quick agenda for today's session. I'll be going through a couple slides just to give you guys a little bit of background on BinaryStream, touch on some of the key capabilities and features of MEM, just to give you guys a little bit of context as to what you can expect to see in the actual demo. From there, I'll hand it over to Jerry to get right into the demo, and then we'll finish off with any questions at the end that you guys may enter through the chat panel. So, about BinaryStream, we've been an ISV in the dynamic space, an independent software vendor since 1999. So what that means is, as an ISV, you'll see here very shortly in the demo, our solutions are add-in solutions inside the ERP. So with MEM, which is what we call multi-entity management for short, just FYI as we go through this presentation. With MEM, you'll see rather quickly here that it's embedded right within Business Central. So from a training standpoint, from a user standpoint, using our solutions right within the ERP is a very seamless experience. With Business Central in particular, we have a few different solutions. Our subscription billing suite, which manages recurring contract billing and deferral requirements, as well as our multi-entity management solution, which we're going to be discussing today. Both these different solutions are available on the Business Central app source if you guys do have access to that online. So some of the key capabilities of MEM. There's certainly a lot more, but I wanted to point out a few of the more notable ones, as well as some of the ones we'll be seeing in the demo presentation here shortly. What we're going to be doing with MEM is maintaining all of your different business entities in a single instance of Business Central. So typically with Business Central out of the box, if you have multiple business entities, you'd have a different Business Central company for each entity in your organization. And what that means is each time you'd want to do some transactions or some work in different entities, you'd have to switch back and forth between companies in Business Central. With MEM, what we're doing is using one of the two global dimensions in Business Central to specify your entity. And then from there, we're going to be able to manage all these different entities inside of one Business Central company. So the great thing about that is there's no need to switch between companies in Business Central if you wanted to do transactions or do some work or run inquiries, those types of things across your different entities. You're able to do all those things from a single window across all of your entities. If you do have the need for company level security across your entities, where perhaps you have a Business Central user in your organization that can only see companies 200, for example, but not the rest of your entities. Even though we're in one Business Central instance now with all of your entities available, we still have the ability to have security there so that these users won't even know that these other entities exist. On the flip side, if you do have other users that have access to multiple entities or perhaps all of your entities, you're able to specify that as well. So it's really up to you and a setup option. Because we're in one Business Central instance, we only have one set of chart of accounts, one set of master records such as vendors, customers, items. The great thing about that is you only have to create a record, let's say such as a vendor, one time. And then from there, you can select which entities can or can't do business with this vendor. And then once you go to run a transaction, only the entities that have access to that vendor can see that record on a transaction list. If you need to edit these records, you would do so only one time as well. So let's say from if a vendor, maybe they changed addresses or they changed contacts, you'd only make that edit one time as opposed to multiple times in your different instances. And then with intercompany transactions, we do the heavy lifting on the due to, due from portion of a transaction that would happen across entities. And then with reporting, we'll show you the different options to run reports on your entire organization for a select entity, or perhaps for slice and dice the data to show reports or inquiries on select few entities. And then the last thing we'll show is if you guys do grow in the future, MEM, it's a very scalable solution where you would be adding a new value to that entity dimension, and it's very easy to set up new entities as you do scale. So we'll show you how that works as well. And just a quick diagram to show you kind of what the difference of Business Central would look like with or without MEM. So in the lower portion of this diagram, you'd see that each different entity you have in your organization would be in a separate kind of siloed Business Central company. With MEM, what we're doing is managing that in one Business Central instance, and we've added some logic to be able to filter and have security to manage your consolidated reporting, manage the due to, due froms, and all those types of things as well. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jerry to get to the product demo.
Great, thanks, Peyton. And Peyton, just let me know if you can see my Business Central window okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really excited to show you our MEM product today once I refresh that. And in the next, say, 35 minutes or so, I'll do my best to give a quick overview of all of those items that Peyton mentioned. So here we have my Business Central screen, and MultiEntity Management is already installed. What's so great about the extension capabilities is that when we install MEM, it's built right into Business Central so that you'll carry on with your business processes as usual with some very minor changes that I'm going to show you really shortly, right after we review some basic setup. So if you take a look up in the top left-hand corner, and in my demo environment, my company name is Cronus Canada. Now, in native Business Central, I would have separate company installs, and when I want to do business with my different companies, I have to log in and log out of my various companies. Well, once you have MEM installed, this changes. And this basically becomes a holding bucket, a data container for all of our companies to operate within. And because you no longer need a separate list, we need a way other than this particular instance to be able to recognize our companies. And how we're doing that is starting with our dimensions, which are fundamental to our product. So I'm just going to log into my dimension window. This is standard Business Central functionality, this window. And as you may already be aware, dimensions are a really key aspect of Business Central for filtering, reporting, tracking what you're going to do with your financial information. And what we're doing is we're taking one of the two global dimensions and we're going to make it our company. So here I've created the dimension company. And if I go into, highlight that, and go into my dimension values, these codes listed here are my companies. And you can see I've got 6 companies created. That's the starting point for us to be able to separate our companies and start entering transactions against these companies. Pretty simple and straightforward. If my business is growing and I want to add another company, I can come down here, type in a code, put in a description, and I'm going to tell you that's it. For all intent and purpose, this is now a company that's available for use. And of course, there's going to be some configuration that comes into play and some different security and setup. But for all intent and purpose, this company is now available for use. And just going to delete that. Whoops, sorry about that. Delete that one there. Now, within this standard Business Central window, where I've added my company dimensions, we've also added an extra setup window. And so we've given the ability for a company setup. And then here's where you'll define on a company by company basis your legal name, your tax registration number, federal ID, a picture or logo if you so choose to add to reports, the standard billing and shipping information. And down here at the bottom is a bank account number. Now this is a default bank account for this company that when you're entering a payment or a cash receipt, out of all of the bank accounts you may have for this one company, this will be the one that shows up by default. So that's it for standard Business Central functionality for setting up MEM. And now we're going to take a look at the MEM specific setup. And we may have requirements to start locking down what users can access a company. Very importantly, what master records a company can work with. And this falls under our multi-entity management setup. And we'll find that here under change setup. So down at the bottom, I've got a series of windows I can access for setup. And it starts at a very high level and sort of logically kind of goes down into more granularity. And we're not going to look at all of these today. If your company has specific fine tuning that you would need to do and you'd want to see how that works, you can definitely follow up with us after the fact and we'd be happy to show that to you. So we'll start at the high level of multi-entity management. And now we said that we're using one of the two global dimensions to identify our companies. And that's what I've got here. I've said global dimension 1 is our company code. And there's the description I've used. And what that means is once I've assigned this global dimension, this is now exclusively used for the company code. It's locked in so that every transaction, every line on a transaction is going to be tagged with a company code, kept separate and reported on as such. So as we go, you'll start to see how MEM is keeping track of what data belongs to which company. Now we've done that, I can start saying, I want to start locking down some security. This is a high level security on this page where we've got our list of master records, our 6 different lists. So customers, items, locations, vendor, bank account, and fixed assets. And because as we mentioned, we've got one list of master records per type, I might want to say that not every customer is available for use for every company. And I can start to narrow that down. So in this case, we're saying we're going to enable security for customers, locations, and vendors. Maybe my items, I share all my items across all my companies. It's really up to you. It's your choice whether you want to lock things down or whether you want to leave that wide open, just to show you how complete this security levels can get. And so now that's done, I'm going to back out of here. And so while we're looking at security, let's take a look at our users. Pop in here to user entities security setup. On the left-hand side, I've got my users. And very important to note that these are Business Central users. We haven't set up a separate list of MEM users for you to manage. they're one and the same. But what this is saying is, for my Maritime Regional Manager, here on the right-hand side are my dimensions I've set up to identify my company, and I'm saying when this user logs in, they're only able to access company 200. In a drop-down or a filter lookup, they will only see company 200. So for all intent and purpose, it's as though all of these other companies don't even exist. They'll have no visibility to them whatsoever. Here's my East Coast General Manager, has access to company 1 and 2. I'm the administrator. By all rights, I have access to everything. However, I've deliberately left off access to company 500. I just want to show you as we go through today, you'll be able to see how complete the security is going to be in this area. Now I can pivot this view quite easily to make the focus by entities. So if I click through, I can easily see which users have access to which companies. And if you have a large list of users and companies to create this relationship for, at the top left, if you see where my mouse is, there's also an import utility, so you can do that as well. And I'm showing you the click by click, one by one basis, but you can also import this to make it a lot easier. Backing out and going back into my setup for some more security. And I'm going to start with a master record security. And now before I click on this, let's just recap what we've done. We've taken a look at assigning our global dimension 1 that's going to define our companies. We've said which users can access which companies. And now we want to take a look at what master records a company can work with. So at the top here, I've got my drop-down menu. This is my list of 6 different master record lists. And in this case, looking at customers, on the left, I've got my companies. And notice my access I've got for these customers. There's just a couple here. If I take a look at company 300, I've got even less access. Probably not the case, but it's a really good visual for you to see how this works and how you can isolate one company and record from another. Here I've got my head office. It looks like I've got access to all customers, and I do. In my head office, I say that I can use all my customers with that particular company. Again, we've got the import function for you to make that very simple and very easily. So that's basically the security setup. And now let's start to take a look at working with multiple companies in one transaction window. We'll deal with our intercompany side of the setup. So as mentioned, we've got all of our companies in one instance, and we can do business with all of those companies in any one single transaction window. So we've added this really cool allocation tool. And so I might say that I've got something like an insurance bill or a phone bill, or I do a revenue allocation where I know that I always want to allocate revenue or expenses across any combination or perhaps even all of my companies. So instead of having to do that manually, we've created a template for you. So if I pop in here, I can list out all of my companies or any grouping or combination of companies I want. And you'll notice that company 0 I have not listed here. On this side, I've got my allocation percentages, and you may notice it doesn't add up to 100%. And I don't have to. I can leave this as a variable, and what that means is whichever company owns the transaction is going to pick up the difference between the 70% and the 100%. Perfect example being company 0, my head office. If I said head office has the insurance bill, they're going to pay the invoice, and I want to allocate across all these companies, head office is going to pick up that 30% automatically. Alternatively, if I said company 100 owns the invoice, they are going to pick up the 30% plus the 10% that is already indicated here, making that total 40% for them. The point here is that you can have the flexibility. You can allocate it to 100% if you want to, but you also don't have to. And you can set up as many templates as you like. The next step in the intercompany setup is referring back to the fact that we're running all of our companies in one instance, we're using our global dimensions to identify our companies. So Business Central itself is never ever going to suggest our intercompany due to and from accounts. And so we have to set those up ourselves. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to build the relationship for originating, due to and due from, and destination, due to and due from accounts. So if I look at my originating company 0 head office and doing business across company 100, these are my due to and from accounts, and I've set up this relationship in every single instance. So as soon as a transaction crosses companies, MEM is going to take a look, get involved, and say these are the accounts that must be populated on the transaction. This happens automatically every single time with no user intervention. So additionally important here is, again, this import function. And I like to say in this case particularly, it's really great if you can set this up on a spreadsheet, break down all your intercompany due to and from accounts, make sure they make sense, and then go ahead and import them, because once that's done, it's going to happen automatically. You don't have to come back into this window again. Makes it really powerful and easy to work with multiple companies in that one transaction window. The last set of window I want to show you, and again, there's a few more here, but not necessarily to look at. Those are more finer details. But if you're working with inventory and you have warehouses, we have an entity location setup window. And in this case, what we're doing is we're assigning ownership of a warehouse. So each company will have its own warehouses that the inventory and the costs reside within. So here I've got my head office. My head office owns the transfer warehouses and warehouse yellow. And another example would be company 200. It owns the blue warehouse, and so on and so forth. Now, when we looked at our master record and sharing master list, we can share our locations. So this window dictates who owns the warehouse, and then in our master record setup window, we can share access. So I might say, well, my head office owns these 3 warehouses, but it also can do business with warehouse blue. And the simple example might be perhaps an inventory transfer where I'm transferring inventory from one warehouse to another. So that's basically our overview of the setup. And keeping in mind, if you're setting up your environment and you already know what you want for companies, you have your accounts and your master records in place, it's not a complicated process to configure MEM and manage all of your companies and businesses in one Business Central company. Like that took us, what, 10 minutes to run through. Okay, so now let's sort of get on to the good stuff and start looking at a few transactions. And what I want to show you is how intercompany transactions will actually work. And we'll start with just a simple purchase invoice. Now, as I come in here, this is a standard Business Central list. And just note the exception here. Here's where the simple minor changes are going to come into play, where you see how MEM is layered into Business Central. And we've got a company code column. So now in this list page, I can see which company a transaction is owned by, and I can only see the companies for which I have access as a user. So even though I'm the administrator, I don't have access to company 500. And if there were any transactions owned by company 500, they'll never show in this list. So now let's pop into the transaction. Again, this is a standard Business Central window, except for we have to be able to identify what company we're doing a transaction in. And so at the header level, we will have a company code. And this drop down will show me the companies that I have access to work within. And so I could enter a transaction against any one of these companies. And notice again, what's missing is company 500. I cannot enter a transaction for company 500 unless I've been assigned access. We also have the allocation template up in the header. And if I go down to the body at the line level, we have a company code at the line level. So while this is defaulting to company 0, and that's just a single company transaction. There's no intercompany involved. I could theoretically have a different company on every one of these lines, as many as I need, to allocate and do business across my companies and assign expenses across my companies. I also have the allocation template here, where I could add that allocation template we looked at that also distributes automatically across multiple companies. And I guess in theory, I could have a company and an allocation, different allocation template on every line, which would be really complicated. But let's start with this single transaction as an example. I've said company 0 owns the transaction, and it's company 0 as an expense. So just a straight 2-line distribution. Let's say, for example, I want to change this, and I'm going to change this to company 100. Now, automatically, I've gone across companies. I should be seeing my intercompany due to and from accounts. And so if I go into my posting, I should have a 4-line distribution right here. So let's open that up. And now I can see my company code here. I've got company 100 is receiving the expense. Company 0 gets the payable or the liability side of the transaction, and automatically my intercompany accounts are displayed here, my due to and from that we set up in that window where we created the relationships. So immediately, without any user intervention, this automatically calculates my intercompany, automatically populates that here. So let's back out of this one, and let's take it a step further and make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to reset that to 0, and I'm going to come over to my allocation template and select my insurance allocation. Now when I go into my posting, I should see something very different. And yet now I have 14 lines. So what does that look like? Now I've got all of those companies set up in the allocation template. So company 4 has an expense and my due to and due from. Company 3 has the expense and the associated due to and due from accounts. Same with company 2, same with company 1. And down here at the bottom, notice I've got company 0 is picking up that 30% balance. There's no due to and from accounts because company 0 owns the payable, the liability. So now in a matter of just a few steps, I've created an invoice for company 0. I've automatically updated, once I post this, of course, the P&L for 5 different companies, and I've automatically updated the intercompany due to and from for all of my accounts, all my companies, in one single transaction window. I don't have to log in and out of my multiple companies to see the other side of the transaction. So that gives you a really good idea of what's happening behind the scenes without any manual processes. It could get really quite complicated, but with MEM, it's very simple and perfectly balanced every single time. So that's my transaction. And a great segue to lead into, we've looked at an invoice. Let's take a look at some payments. So I'm going to go into my payment journal. And what I'm going to show here is we're going to take a look at paying bills 2 different ways. The first thing I'm going to point out is we've got our company code on the header and the allocation template on the header. And also at the line level, we've got our company code. And if I scroll over, there's also way over here the MEM allocation template ID. I could also restrict this and do separate batches and filter by company if I wanted to. But what I'm going to show you here is how to do either a centralized or a decentralized all in one batch for all of my companies. So to start with, let's take a look as if we were doing a centralized batch. If I go into prepare, suggest vendor payments, there's a lot of things here we're not going to pay any attention to. I'm just going to grab everything that could be any vouchers that are owing, sorry. So take a look at the company code column. I've now got company 1, company 0, 4, 2, 3. And as I scroll over, notice my bank account number is WWB operating. And if you remember when we did the setup for my company code 0 head office, I said default on all transactions for payments or cash receipts, this particular bank account. So I can, in one step, basically within one window, I can make a centralized check run or electronic transfer, if you so desire, for all of my companies in one transaction window, very simply and easily. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to remove these, and we're going to show you the other payment type. So I'll delete this. And the only difference now is going to be this decentralized button. This is a MEM feature, and when I click this, it's going to create a decentralized payment batch. I'm going to do the same process to go through prepare, suggest vendor payments, exactly the same process. And notice that this is the same list of vouchers that appeared in the last batch. But as I scroll over, you can now see I now have the bank account that belongs to the specific company that we set up as a default on that company setup. Remember I said you could have multiple bank accounts per company, so you could override this, but the point being it is going to create that separate payment. If you have blank check stock and you're using Micker, all you have to do is put your checks into the printer, away you go, you've run your entire company-wide payment batch within one single transaction. So you're starting to see the similarities where MEM is layered into all of the various transaction windows that you could be working in, whether it's a purchase journal, a general journal, a fixed assets journal, whatever the case may be, it's all going to look the same where we've got the company code at the header and the company code at the line level. Another example would be a cash receipt. So even in cash receipts works the same way where we've got our default company code. And in this case, I'm saying I'm going to put cash into one specific bank account. And perhaps this customer actually does work and belongs to different companies. So I can apply to invoices that belong to different companies that the customer has access to, that I as a user have access to. And so here I've applied this one payment going into one bank account to company 104 invoices. So it's a very quick and powerful way to handle multi-company cash receipts as well. Just back out of here, and let's say even with inventory, let's say I want to transfer, we took a look at the warehouses, let's say I want to transfer from one warehouse to another. Here's some functionality that you might find useful, and if I go into the item reclass, once again, I have the company code at the top on my header, and I've got the company code at the line level, and this is a little bit different now. If you notice that the company code is now grayed out at the line level, and the reason for that is we talked about the warehouses are owned by a company. So in this case, my warehouse yellow is actually owned by company 0. So I can't change that. I can't change this to be a different company code at the line level. I don't need to, and I wouldn't want to. Now, let's say, for example, I'm transferring to warehouse blue. And if you remember in the setup, I said warehouse blue is owned by company 200. And if I go over here 4 more columns, I can see that that's now showing us new company code 200 happens automatically. So when I effect this transfers from one warehouse to another across a different company. And of course, those due to and from accounts come into play so that that cost for that inventory is going to transfer out of one company and into another. So I've given you a really basic overview of transactions so you can see how that works. But we haven't talked about reporting, so let's just take a look at reporting for a few minutes. And I do that by coming into here to my search, typing MEM, and down here, right now, we've given you a basic collection of reports. There's 50 at this point that we're going to be able to filter by company. So I'll go through and explain how these reports will work, because we have the ability for consolidated or segregated. And these first reports in this list, we have trial balance, balance sheet, income statement, account schedule, AP and AR, trial balance, et cetera, et cetera. And these are consolidated reports to start with. So if I click on income statement, there's all kinds of filters here, and we'll just ignore the dates for now. I've got a company filter here. So what that means is I can come in here and I can select any combination of companies I want to combine together on this one consolidated report. Or I can leave it blank and say, I want to see all of my companies. If I come down here to the bottom where it says send to, I can send this to Excel or to PDF or to Word, or I can send it to the Business Central report scheduler as well. In this case, we'll just preview it. And when this comes up, you're going to see a one-page, I'll make this bigger. You're going to see a one-page consolidated total report. And if you look at the top where my dimension filter is, I removed the filter and said I want all of my companies to be displayed here, but just notice company 5 is not displayed. There's that security access coming into play here. So that's our single page consolidated report. I'll go back into my reports. Again, these are all here as consolidated reports, but as I scroll down, there's a few more details you'll start to see. And now I'm seeing where I can segregate these reports by entity. So let's take a look at the same report. We'll do an income statement by entity. And again, I'm going to remove my company filter. So I get all of my reports. And now when this pops up, I'm going to see a page per company. I'll make that bigger. Again, the same dimension, 0 through 4. I've got my head office here, my company 1, 2, 3, and 4, no company 5. So these are my individual income statements per company, but this doesn't give me a consolidated total. So we've added a really cool report to give totals with a column per company. So I'll come back in here to my reports. Scroll all the way down here. We've got a spread global dimension. And we have an additional feature on this filter list where we can automatically print to Excel. If you've got many companies, no matter how you display your layout of your report, whether it's in landscape, you may not get all of your companies going across the top, and so you can automatically send this out to Excel and then slice and dice, do whatever you need to do with it. I'm just going to, in this case, remove the company filter and just go straight to preview. Now what you're going to see is a company list, a company per column, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, with this total as well. Again, this is based on the companies I have access to. That's where these totals are coming from. So, if I removed access to company 4, this number here is going to change automatically. Whatever companies I have access to are the only things that are going to show up in this window. One last report I want to show you is we talk about our master list being shared across companies, and I just want to show you how the company separation works. And so we'll look at our vendor detail trial balance by entity. I'll remove my filter. I want to display all of my companies. And now I'm going to have a vendor list per company. And just take a note up at the top. This is my head office. My vendor name is Progressive Home Furnishings, and I've got a distinct list of vouchers for this particular company. And as I go through the report, this is the same company. On this page, I'm now showing company 100, and there are Progressive Home Furnishing vouchers, 2 totally different vouchers for this particular vendor within this company. Going to company 200, again, I have another list of vouchers for this vendor. 300 is the same, just one invoice. I get to the end, company 400 has another list of vouchers. And at the bottom, if I scroll down, I've got a total for this company, and I've got my grand total of all of my payables across all of my companies in one simple view. So you can see that even though these master records are being shared across company, there is no crossover, there is no combining or losing sight of what amounts and payables are due for each company. One final point that I can't demo, but it's really important to recognize here, is if you're using any third-party product to create your financial statements, your balance sheet, your P&L, your cash flow, whatever it be, if you're using Solver or Jet Reports or Power BI, some of the more common ones, those will work well and work with the security aspect of multi-entity management in the BC environment. So that's a high-level view for you of how Business Central and multi-entity management work together. Pretty much anything you want to do as far as managing your records and companies in a more efficient and timely fashion can be done in a single transaction window. Your reports can be consolidated, segregated as you need without having to do anything other than saying, these are the companies I want to see here. All of this being very, very powerful, enabling accuracy and making your day-to-day business processes both simple and efficient. And so that's it. I'd like to take now the time to turn it back over to any Q&A that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Peyton. This is Bobby with TrinSoft. As we mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature. We'll be happy to hit on any of these general questions that may be out there. Okay, I have a couple questions come in. Peyton, are you able to see those, or do you want me to read it off to you?
I'm not able to see them, so.
Okay, sure. The first question says, how does MEM handle different functional currencies? Example, 6 companies have USD as the home currency, and then there are 54 that are in Canadian currency.
Yeah, so
right. Oh, go ahead.
I can answer that, Jerry. So
yeah,
with
sure.
different functional currencies, what MEM would do is you'd have to have a separate Business Central install for each functional currency. So if you had 6 US dollar companies, you could merge those all into one Business Central company using MEM. And then for your 50 some odd Canadian companies, you could merge those into a single Business Central instance using MEM. So as opposed to having 60 something different Business Central instances, you'd have 2. So that's one of the limitations with MEM is the functional currency. You can't combine different functional currencies in a single Business Central instance, but you are able to consolidate like entities with like functional currencies.
Perfect, great, thank you. There's one other question for now. It says, how does MEM manage different accounting periods or fiscal periods, such as December 31st, March 31st end dates?
Yeah, so those are, I guess, really the 2 limitations with MEM would be it would have to be same functional currency if you wanted them all in one instance of Business Central, and then the same goes for different fiscal periods or fiscal year ends. So again, you'd have to group the like period ends together, and then you'd have a different Business Central instance for each individual reporting current, or reporting period.
Got it. Okay, again, if anybody else has any questions, please use the chat feature. That is what we are using to answer these. One other question has come in. It says, we have multiple companies set up in one general ledger. and we use we have multiple companies set up in one general ledger and use a manual intercompany process. We use the department code to designate each company. Can MEM be set up to reference the department code dimension instead of the company?
Yes, it can. The only condition in that is it must be one of the two global dimensions. So if you're already highlighting department and that is one of the global dimensions, then yes, you could carry on and use that going forward.
Great, thank you. All right, I don't see any other questions, so we'll maybe wrap it with that. If anybody does have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or anybody else on the TrinSoft team, and we can certainly get these answered through the BinaryStream team for you. I would like to say on behalf of TrinSoft and BinaryStream teams that we just want to thank you for your time on the webinar today. Special thanks to Jerry and Peyton for taking the time to walk us through MEM. Certainly was a great presentation. Finally, again, if you'd like a copy of the presentation slides or a link to the video recording, please let us know and we can certainly get those sent your way. Any final comments, Jerry or Peyton, before we sign off?
Nothing from my end. Thank you guys for the webinar, and thank you to all the attendees for your time today.
Yeah, same. Thanks, Bobby, and thanks to everybody listening today. Really enjoyed being here.
Yep, no problem. Thank you again to you guys, and thanks to all of you on attendance. If you have any questions, again, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.